everyone, and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel and the Take 5 Art Journal collaboration video for June. Today we're going to be working with prompts chosen by Lucy over at Lucyoodledoo. She's one of the ladies taking part in our collaboration and she's amazing and also does illustration, so I'll be sure to leave a link to not only her channel as well as the rest of the ladies, but also to her Etsy store. I believe there's prints and cards and lots of items available, all with her beautiful hand drawing. She chose some really fun prompts for us this month and I absolutely love my page and I can't wait to show you how I created it. Getting started, as usual, I'm using my white gesso onto my Dilutions journal. I did have a bit of seepage from my previous page onto this page, so I had to give it a nice big coat, and I'm making sure to thoroughly dry it using my heat tool. I'm then going to be taking my Dilutions paint in white linen and I'm going to be adding a very generous coat of this to the page. I'm using a wide bristled brush. I find that I get the most even coat and I like the bit of extra texture that it adds. Again, I'm going to be drying each layer using my heat tool just to make sure that it's ready for the next step. I do add 2 different coats of white paint just as I really wanted to block out any markings that was on my page before, and I wanted it to be a nice bright white canvas for the base of my page. And of course I'm going to take my heat tool again just to make sure that that layer is thoroughly dry. I do give it a little bit extra drying time just to make sure that there's no sticky residue left behind from using a lot of paint in one layer. I'm then going to be moving on to the first prompt on Lucy's list, which is to add stamps or stencils. I will be using both, but first up is stencils. So I've chosen an irregular dot stencil, which is this one here, a star one and a honeycomb pattern. For now I'm taking my white texture paste from Liquitex and I'm taking my large wide spatula and I'm just going to be making a little strip of this in the middle of the page. I'm then going to also lift that up and I'm going to repeat the same on the other page. I didn't want to completely cover the page in texture, but I knew that I wanted it to be a feature in the middle of my page. I'm just using my fingers as well. I went a little bit over the edge of the stencil with the texture paste and so I'm just smoothing the excess texture paste with my finger. I'm also cheating a little bit and using this for the second prompt on Lucy's list, which is circles. As well as wanting to add texture as a feature, I really wanted to combine the two and have the circles be a big part of the design of my page this time, so I'm making sure that I take both of those off the list and only use one product, which is a bonus. I'm using my heat tool to dry that again, but I did only give that a light dry as I do find texture paste tends to pop when you heat it too much. I'm then moving on to adding some watercolours. These are just my Artist Loft watercolours. They're really affordable, but I find them such a great watercolour set, especially if you're a beginner like me or you just like messing around with colour. I'm going to be taking a few of the blue shades and I've mixed them together with the same brush that I used the gesso and the white paint on my page, and I'm just making some semicircles around the page as almost like little waves of colour. I do get a little bit of a different colour each time. Some of them are a little bit lighter and some a little bit darker. I'm then just adding a little bit more water to my little dish that I'd used to hold my brush, and I'm just going to blend all of those with the white paint and just to have it be a little bit lighter on the inside and a bit darker on the outside. Again, I wasn't too precise. This was just following the circles and following the arches, and I will build up my layers. So again, in between each layer and each step I'm using my heat tool just to make sure that everything is completely dry or as dry as can be. Once that's completely dry, I'm then going to rinse off my brush and take some more of my white linen dilutions paints. I'm just going to do random splodges of this in the middle of my page, and I want them to have a little bit of that brushstroke texture, so I'm not using a lot of paint, and I do find with the dilutions paints a little bit goes a long way. I'm then going to be taking a smaller brush and using my yellow dilutions paint. I'm also going to be adding some little tinier like patches and splodges on my page. I will also be feathering these ones out just so that they're not looking quite so like leopard spots. I really actually love this. I wasn't sure when I first started if I'd messed up my page, but I'm definitely glad that I added the yellow, and I think that the colours of the blue and the yellow pop really nicely against each other. I'm then taking my After Midnight dilutions paint, and I'm taking an even smaller brush, and I'm just using again a very tiny piece of paint and feathering that and making sure that that tiny piece of paint spreads across as much of my paper as possible. I'm then going to be taking my slate grey paint, and I'm going to be doing the exact same thing, a very tiny piece of paint, and just adding them inside that outer edge. The outer edge is where I want to have the darker colour, and so I'm just mixing those together. I'm then going to take my watercolour water and I'm going to blend those out, all with the same brush. I'm not really caring if I'm going to have a little bit of contamination between colour. It's not really bothering me, and I find that it actually worked and blended really well. I thought it was going to be a bit too muddy, but as you'll see as I start working on the page, it blends and works really well. I decided that I wanted to go back in with one of the darker blue colours from my watercolour set, so I'm just spraying that with some water, and then using my brush directly from the pan, I'm going to darken up the outer edges. I think that this is where it makes such a difference and such an impact. The watercolours are quite thin if you mix them with water, but they are buildable, especially on top of the paints, and I really love the boldness of them, but also the fact that you can see the layers underneath as well. The next prompt is going to be a little bit of a fun one. The next item on Lucy's list was a feather, and I don't actually have any bird's feathers. I do however have these, which is something my husband bought for me as one of my crafty gifts, and they're these like skeleton leaf embellishments in pink, and they are huge. I don't necessarily know that he intended for them to be so big, and I've never found a use for them, but I thought that they would be perfect for this page and this prompt, so I'm just trimming them down a little bit. They were very delicate and very easy to cut, and then I'm using some of my gel matte medium or matte gel medium from Liquitex, and I'm applying a little bit before the leaves, a little bit after the leaves, and they are sticking down really well. I was a little bit dubious, but even after I've finished this and I'm filming my voiceover, they're still stuck on the page, so that's a winner in my eyes. Once those have dried, I'm going to be going back to my watercolour set, and I'm actually going to be using just one colour, which is the darkest brown, and my medium brush. I'm going to just be freehand drawing some very old, creepy, decrepit trees on the outside of my pages. I definitely wanted to add a little bit of darkness, and I always love the weird old ugly trees that are kind of scary, so I thought I would have a go at drawing my own, and it didn't go so well. I think my brush was definitely too thick, but you will see I do end up wiping them out with a baby wipe, changing them, but I do love it in the end, and I think it fits the page perfectly. So this is definitely going to be one of those moments where I probably wish that I don't share this on YouTube, but I thought it's a great way of just using up some of the empty space in the page, and I like ugly trees as well, so I'm just using the brown watercolour. I'm having this quite thick, so there's not too much water in there, so I am having to respray it after every 2 or 3 brushes with it. But yeah, next time, or if you're making a page like this and you want to add some ugly trees to yours as well, definitely use a smaller brush, add a little bit more water. But the bonus of using a watercolor is if you do hate it, then you can just use a baby wipe and to a degree change what you don't like. I will admit at the moment my trees look more like something out of Doctor Who to me, but I really like to just let loose and be free in my art journal, and it's not a place to be a perfectionist for me, and I always seem to like my pages a little more afterwards, so I just decide I'm gonna go with it and see what happens. So as you can see, I'm adding an extra tree onto the edge of the page. I'm following the edge of the page very closely. I'm actually painting ever so slightly onto the cardstock that I have behind my pages, and here I'm going to add one on the left hand side as well. And I really like the effect that this creates. It's like you're looking through a telescope or a looking glass into this little place that I've created. So that was definitely very fun. At the moment I'm trying to use my ginormous brush just to add a little bit of detailing, like the little loose twigs that are hanging. I'm not going to stress about it too much. I think that I've already got the basic idea of what I wanted down, so I'm going to take my heat tool and dry that, and then I'm going to move on to the next fun prompt. The next prompt on Lucy's list was to use one non-art item to make marks, so to either create bubbles or circles. So I decided I'm going to use a drinking straw. I've already cut this in half, and then I've cut it long ways as well, and I'm going to be dipping that into the same brown watercolor that I used for my trees, and I'm going to be creating some like pebbles or crunchy leaves along the bottom of my page, almost to create a floor. It's going to bring the trees in and down and to keep in with my circle theme. This was actually really fun and I never would have thought of it, so thanks Lucy for super great prompts. The next prompt on Lucy's list was to use washi tape, of course, the one item that all crafters have and never use. So I found this really pretty sunshine yellow washi tape in my stash, and so I'm using that just in the center of my design, and that's going to be where I'm putting my title. I'm also using some antique photo distress ink, and I'm just adding that over where I used those marks with my drinking straw, and they're also going to be little leaves or splatters or something. I think it works really well to help create that mystical effect. I'm then going to go back to the first prompt, which was stenciling or stamping, and I'm using my black StazOn ink, and this is a Finnabair irregular polka dot stamp, and I'm using that just to go around my washi tape to make a little border almost. And then I'm going to be using this Studio Calico stamp, and I'm going to be taking one of the sentiments on there, and I'm just using a really old stamp block from Hobbycraft, and I'm just stamping that in the middle. I didn't think it would stamp as well as it did, being that it was over the spine of the book, but it stamped perfectly, and it says, "Oh darling, let's be adventurers," and it was just so perfect and I love it. I'm also going to be using my yellow dilution spray mist, and that's going to be my page for this month finished. Thank you very much for watching. If you have, I really hope you've enjoyed it. I loved this page. I'm sorry that my voiceover has not been the best. I've been very poorly recently, so I'm a little bit quiet and very snuffly, so I apologize for that. Thank you so much, Lucy, for picking amazing prompts. They were so much fun to use. As always, please check out the other amazing ladies who are in the Take 5 collab. Their channels are all listed below, and I will be back very soon with another video. Thanks for watching.